The largest number of Epstein files ever have been released, a huge tranche of about 3 million documents. I'm going to go through a couple highlights, including things like this, which show that the DOJ under Donald Trump had a list of leads of people they at least could investigate and potentially charge and didn't. I'm Ari Melber, a lawyer and journalist. You can subscribe for my YouTubes. I've covered this story and other legal stories for a long time. This is going to be admittedly a partial look at some of these files. But we are getting materials about how the Justice Department tried or failed to look at this case, to investigate this over the years through Epstein's arrest and suspicious death in custody, as well as how they looked at other individuals, as well as all the weird dealings and criminal dealings and attempts to abuse women and girls and actually do so, and other individuals from Trump's current cabinet officials to his Fed chair pick to Elon Musk being in the new tranche of files. 2 points off top. This is a classic example where both things are true. I cover a lot of stories and people search for narratives. Both narratives, critical and constructive, are true about the Epstein files. The critical one is, are you ever really going to get to the bottom of a cover-up that has been clearly proven as a cover-up when so many powerful elites are in charge of the files, in charge of the government, tied to each other? What's the point? Yada, yada. There's truth in that because the DOJ only got here under some of the most tremendous pressure, a public campaign backed ultimately by one of the widest votes in Congress that we've ever seen. That took years, and they still broke the law. They still completely violated the law for over 40 days after the deadline, and the release now may still be partial, although it is voluminous. So that's point one. Point two, pressure works. This has been an extraordinarily effective, probably one of the most effective public legal pressure campaigns to change the law and the secrecy that protects, in this case, potentially very suspicious people. Legally, I'm saying that in all fairness. One of the most effective ever. And we're learning things we never normally learn, and I'm going to talk about that. The single largest clue about the DOJ's approach to this comes in a document titled Jeffrey Epstein with a bunch of numbers on it, and it's partially redacted, but it still has a lot of material about who the DOJ viewed as Epstein's team. Now, some of them could be investigated for potential crimes. One of them, Maxwell, was convicted. Others, it's possible, in all fairness, might be defending him, but not part of a crime. For example, lawyers are always tied. Criminal defense lawyers are tied to people accused of or convicted of crimes. Doesn't mean that they help do them. They provide legal defense. And under our system, the worst of the worst still get that. So to be clear, not everyone on this list is automatically, provably indictable, but you got people redacted, you got employees, you got Maxwell who was, and then you got a bunch of people they looked at who were not indicted, which raises the question whether both the Trump DOJ and other DOJs before and after, which were under, for example, Democratic administrations, failed to really pull the threads on these leads, and then still to this day or not. They also have Brunel, who's an individual who since died, who was listed right here. Epstein, after indictment, was suspiciously found dead in his cell, and the Trump DOJ at the time ruled it a suicide. Brunel was found dead in his cell in Europe, and the government there ruled it a suicide. And as we've reported, there are questions when key people in this kind of matrix, when they are ever caught and they wound up dead, whether you've had a full investigation of that. And so we're still combing through the documents about whether we're going to get more material about the death. That's one of the things the law requires. But this investigative document shows that there were a lot of other people on the DOJ's radar, including some that are not being named here, and we're going to continue to report this out, who were not pursued and indicted. And that raises questions about the cover-up and whether they backed off this case and dealt with basically Epstein died, Maxwell, and moved on. A second key point here I want to talk about, and I'm just got a lot of documents here, so bear with me, goes to whether they're complying with the key investigative material for getting justice. Congressman Khanna, after the Friday release, said what he's checking is whether they have all the FBI interview statements, what are called 302s, so that you can go through, even if names are redacted for protection, and look at what victims said, as well as the emails from Epstein's computers and the original Florida probe. Those are things he's looking at. Point number 3, there are a lot of questions about whether Epstein got as far as he did and away with so much by criminally blackmailing people, extorting people and blackmailing. That matters because if you want to address these past crimes, address whether anyone else should be charged, as I mentioned, and prevent this in the future, these kind of operations, the government has to care about that. Pam Bondi claimed that they looked at this and they found no credible blackmail evidence. Well, here's a headline. There is credible blackmail evidence in these new released Epstein files. So that's a change. One of them comes from these emails Epstein would send himself, and whether they are true is a separate question. You can blackmail someone with something that's 100% true, partially true, or false. Certain types of blackmail and extortion are obviously a crime. And there are these lengthy emails that, in fact, in 2013, quite a while ago, Epstein was sending to himself about prominent individuals, including Bill Gates. And so we need more reporting in time to confirm the veracity of things that someone as dodgy as Epstein says, but you see new examples of the things that he could use to try to blackmail people. Then you add to that Howard Lutnick, who's in the Trump cabinet today, who said publicly in 2025 that he viewed Epstein as one of the greatest blackmailers of all time and that he cut off ties with him. Okay, so Bondi in Trump's cabinet says no blackmail, Lutnick says blackmail, and Lutnick said he cut off all ties. I want to get the quote right. I will, quote, never be in a room with that disgusting person again, he said in 2005. And yet, in these new files, among the 3 million that we got new, in 2012, okay, many years after he said he was cutting off contact, he was still actively emailing to plan a trip to Epstein's Island. That flatly contradicts what he said. He's in the Trump administration. He was on that trip, according to emails, with his wife. Not clear whether he would come with his wife, whether he viewed this as social. Not any email evidence that alleges a crime. Unclear whether they made the trip. But it flatly breaks what he said he was going to cut off contact with, and it raises the question why Lutnick was so clear to publicly accuse Epstein of being a blackmailer. I've been covering how the House has continued to investigate this and issued new subpoenas for other people in Epstein's orbit. The new chart includes people that are facing further depositions and testimony before Congress. Again, I talked about how some of this has been held back, but pressure can work. In that orbit includes Epstein's lawyer, Darren Indyke, his money man, Richard Kahn, who is now scheduled for a March 11th deposition under congressional pressure and oath to discuss some of this. And now they have all of this material. Then there's the Elon Musk of it all. Elon Musk is a very powerful figure when you think about the amount of business he does. He's one of the most powerful figures in the world. When you look at Starlink, at Tesla, owning X, sprawling business empire, and then recently, of course, worked with Trump so closely, he had a kind of a roving super cabinet job. He also memorably accused Donald Trump of being in the Epstein Files, etc. What we find here are emails tied to Musk, where he is actively trying to go to visit Epstein or Epstein Island. He wants to have a party. He says he's ready to have one of the wildest parties. Again, if you're going to be fair as a journalist or lawyer, that doesn't mean it happened. And if it happened and they went to a party, it doesn't mean that you can yet discuss credible evidence of a crime. But Elon Musk, who's out here saying Trump's in the files, it turns out only because some of this disclosure has, under pressure, gotten to this point, we learn he's in the files. Another individual, Donald Trump has been pushing as now to take the super powerful position of running the Fed. Donald Trump's nominee, Kevin Warsh, appears in the files as an Epstein invitee to a social event. These are just some of what we're learning, and it speaks to why the transparency matters and just how many top-level people, even if they weren't involved in crimes, were tied into this. This person who basically was using, by his own account, efforts that sounded like blackmail, sounded like gathering material on all these people, reaching into clearly both parties and the top financial and business elites who have so much sway over the U.S. and other governments. So that's just some of the summary here. as someone who's covered this and other legal cases, it's really striking. There's actually more here than you can get through in a day of reading and reporting or one of these videos. And it's not one simple narrative. It's not that it's only tied to one group. The questions that face the DOJ's failure to pursue these leads, which I think is quite obvious, involve really both parties, because anyone in charge of the DOJ, at the time this list was made in the first Trump term when they did indict Epstein. But even if they drop the ball, what about the next Merrick Garland DOJ? When you look at the number of people implicated, you get a sense of why Epstein was able to stay basically out of much legal pressure, even though we know he'd already been convicted in the Florida case, got soft treatment, and people have asked how this worked. We're getting a window into that deeper than we had before. There's a difference between, speculating about it, having a sense of it, or Lutnick saying it in general, and seeing the hard evidence. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's really fascinating. This is all the way back to as recently as 2025, where you have criminal histories and you have pages and pages of governmental leads and material redacted about how they were looking into tips and allegations. This is the type of crime fighting material that we usually don't see. But remember, we don't see it because there are laws that err on the side of secrecy. Here, Congress, under pressure, changed laws to err or push more on the side of sunlight. And so because of that, we've got 3 million more Epstein files. What comes next? A fuller review, which actually takes time to figure out whether these were valid redactions or not. Again, going through some of my notes, the DOJ admits that they've redacted or withheld 200,000 pages of material. There can be valid reasons for that. The law gives very narrow privileges, including to protect victims. So it will take time to determine whether they are using that and abusing that to hide the most important stuff, or whether, as I mentioned, that both things are true, whether under pressure, with many lawyers working on this and many of these documents spread throughout the DOJ, having a total cover-up of all the documents indefinitely proved to be untenable. A final point for those who followed this closely, the Congress had not yet sued to try to get a court to force this compliance. And what we didn't publicly know a few weeks ago, we may know now, which is you're not going to look very good going to court if you bring that case and say they're not complying at all, and then the very next day they drop 3 million documents on you. So in the backroom dealings, which I dealt with as a reporter and a lawyer, and go back years far enough when I briefly worked in Congress, there can be times where DOJ says, hey, don't take us to court yet. We're really going to drop 3 million documents. And people say, well, do we believe them or not? The government can lie to you. But this, I think, gives more of a clue as to why we hadn't seen that escalation. If Congress determines that this is decent or close, maybe that's where it lands. If they determine that there's a lot missing, by some estimates, there could still be millions of documents missing, or that they're abusing redactions, and they can go that way. So that's a report on some of this. My other videos have material on those subpoenas and some of the other Epstein Files information we've learned. You can check those out. Stay informed, subscribe if you want more videos like this.